Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome to the Salzburger Kunstverein and to the opening walkthrough by Stan Douglas. We were delighted to work with Stan this year. This exhibition has toured from Wiels in Brussels to the Berardo Museum in Portugal, to Victoria Mural Gallery in London, to David Zwirner Gallery in New York, and we're delighted to open it here in the German-speaking world in Salzburg. I'm not going to talk much about Stan. I think Stan's work is known to everybody here in the room. We're all very excited to open this exhibition. At 8 o'clock, we're going to do official speeches. So I thought what we'd do is save this time so that we can listen to Stan talk about his film. The Secret Agent, which is based on the book by Joseph Conrad. And that's all I should say. So thank you, Stan, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Seamus. So on the 25th of April, 1974, the Portuguese entry, the banned Portuguese entry to the Eurovision Song Contest was played on the radio. This is a signal for all of the Portuguese military to mutiny and take over all the government buildings as well as the secret police. People woke up in Portugal and realized suddenly that there was, after 40 years, fascism was over, and they had a new possibility. What was happening is that the military is being told to maintain their battles against the liberation struggles in Africa. In Angola, Mozambique, 3 other countries, Portuguese had what they called their overseas territories, which was very crucial to the economy for resources, etc. And so the government wanted to maintain that source of income, but the people did not want them there. The military knew this, and they realized they could not sustain that, so they had this mutiny. So as everything seemed like kind of pacific at the beginning, only 4 people died. It was called the Carnation Revolution because it was carnation season. They gave the flowers to the military, put them in the barrels of their guns, pinned it onto their clothing. But the year after, there was something called the Hot Summer '75 because it's uncertain as to what direction the country would go. After April 74, it was what they called the PREC, or the Revolutionary Process in Progress, which is a time when they tried to realize what a new Portugal would be, post-fascism. The military was divided. There was sort of a communist-affiliated side. There was a sort of social democrat side. The Communist Party was quite powerful at this point because they were the only organized political organization in the country because they were associated with trade unionism throughout the fascist period. So it was a concern that they would be sort of set and sort of assumed to take power. This led to a lot of people in '75 taking very extreme actions on the extreme right and extreme left. There were hijackings, bombings, and all kinds of terror activity in the country in that period until the fall when the new constitution was ratified. So it is in this moment of turmoil that I set this piece, kind of a liminal moment. The government's not quite solvent, not quite stable. There's internal divisions, attempt of coups inside the government itself, plus people there are uncertain as to what the country will be. And through this act of various terrorist acts, somehow people on the left and the right and even socialist groups thought that by doing these acts, they could affect extremely different points of view, sort of outlining the ambiguity of terrorism in general, which is both a very emphatic but also very ambiguous action because often the intentions and the interpretations are wildly different. So I combined the situation of the Hot Summer '75 with a novel from Joseph Conrad called The Secret Agent, written in the 20s but set in the late 19th century and inspired by a real event when people tried to blow up the Greenwich Observatory, a failed terrorist attempt to blow up the Greenwich Observatory. Conrad's story tells a tale of a person who is a Polish man, naturalized but born in London, just like Conrad himself, who was given one last chance to make good with his embassy handler, probably the Russian embassy, who wants to make the government more repressive, to somehow not let them be so lenient to the various activists who are taking harbor in London. So he has to do this thing, otherwise he's in big trouble and he'll lose his money. Inadvertently, he kills his wife's autistic brother, and when she discovers this, she kills him. In my adaptation, I've changed a number of things. One thing being the nature of this character, Stevie. He's no longer Winnie's brother, he's Winnie's son, and Verloc, the secret agent's stepson. It's not a Russian embassy anymore, it's an American embassy, because based on a guy named Frank Carlucci, who was sent by the Americans to come to Lisbon to sort of take care of the situation. Of course, the Americans were very concerned about what would happen in Portugal, concerned that there might be a communist government inside Europe. And so they added their own form of terrorism to the whole situation by organizing NATO war games off the coast and bringing battleships to the territory of there. Instead of being the Greenwich Observatory, what we have in this piece is the Marconi installation, it's the Simbra that's under attack. This is a very important contact of telephony between Portugal or Europe and the rest of the world, and in a way symbolizes a different kind of contact. It's kind of a symbol of the modernity of the country. The Greenwich Observatory, of course, regulates time, and time is crucial for trade, for commerce, for navigation of the seas. But telephony, of course, is somehow related to the network, and this is kind of a more crucial, more contemporary kind of communication system and site of commerce and power to a certain degree. So these are the sort of different transformations I've made. And Verloc, the secret agent, is no longer Polish. He's actually an Englishman born in Porto and therefore naturalized by birth. So what happens in this piece, we see various states of people, usually men, telling other men how things work, how the world is, and how they are in control of the situation, and the other one should do what they say. But in a way, all these people do is talk. They're always talking about how their views are the crucial ones. The other one must toe the line, which in a way, in very many ways, parallels what happens in the terrorist act. Because in the terrorist act, the person who's making that utterance is saying that my message is more important than your life. And this kind of is played out in a micro level on the various sort of Chinese box of situations inside this piece of Secret Agent. It's a film that was shot on location in Portugal in March last year, and spatialized, as you see, across these 6 screens. There's always at least 2 screens going simultaneously. Sometimes they're briefly all on, sometimes 4 on, but there's always at least 2 going on. And these, in a way, represent the different social strata of the society being depicted during the story. There's, on the far left, there is, in a way, private space, private commerce. On the right, there's governance. In the center, there's a street, in a way, the interface between private space and public space or governance. This is where we see the cinema interior. We see the street, and we see a nightclub, the places where these kind of negotiations are going to take place. Some characters are stuck in one location. The professor is more or less stuck in the street. Verloc goes all the way up and all the way down. As we see, the embassy official goes from, sort of bounces directly from the governance to this private space. But they have all different sort of social relationships depicted by these things. So in effect, over time, you realize what's going on spatially in this room. So in a way, you navigate the story with your body. And the idea is that the montage is happening with your body as well. You decide what to look at, you decide, and those decisions will sort of change your perception of what you're seeing in the space. Sometimes there's, mostly on that screen, we see characters talking to each other across the space. So you have to decide, who do I watch? Do I watch the person speaking or the person listening? And this is the case, too, where we see that shift of perspective, where in one instance there's the silhouette of the Chief Inspector Heat talking to the police commissioner. Then later we see the silhouette of the commissioner talking to the Secretary of State. So there, that hierarchy has changed as well. Over on that side, we also see some guards change to the embassy. We see an exchange of ushers at the cinema. So again, there's this situation of interchangeability taking place. One major model for this piece was a film by, I forget his first name, Richard Fleischer, I believe, who made a film called The Boston Strangler in around 1968 or 69. He'd been to Expo 67 in Montreal and saw all these multi-screen films and realized, I could make a film like this. People often think that the Thomas Crown Affair was the first split-screen film, but in addition to things like Napoleon's by Abel Gance early in the 20th century, this was a very effective use of that technique in a commercial film, where they actually were matting out parts of the frame of their cameras to get the highest optical quality images, and actually planned each shot to have a thematic and dramatic relationship to what was going on the things simultaneously. So you simultaneously see things happening in different parts of the city as they're looking for the Boston Strangler. So this sense of confusion, uncertainty as to what's important, what you're looking at, the sense of paranoia, is something I try to adapt for, inspire what I'm doing here with the Secret Agent. So in a way, this is an extension of what I've been doing for a number of years, which I call recombinant narratives, narratives which will sort of change over time, but those pieces were often single screen pieces, so they had an extension in time. Often they would last thousands and thousands of years before they repeat exactly. These ones this is more of an extension in space, where we have a spatialization of the story and allowing the viewer to change and transform it by how they perceive it, how they negotiate with their bodies. There was one little recombinant aspect, and that's the music we hear. In the scene that was going on when we came in, I believe, which is in a nightclub, we see the professor and Ossipon talking on one screen, and we see actually coming up right now, they'll be talking on one screen, and on the other screen there's a band playing on stage. There's 6 variations of what the band plays on the stage, which are variations, very, very loose variations on Clear Spot by Captain Beefheart, played by a keyboard player and a guitarist and a drum machine. These have different sort of qualities. Some are slow and languorous. Some are quite sort of anxious and high tempo. These things we see the band playing, the music we hear the band playing 3 seconds ago will be heard as incidental music or movie music in the cinema. We hear music in the cinema being filtered through the door in the lobby. We hear it in the projection booth where the terrorist cell meets. And we hear it at the end when Winnie finally kills Verlog. So this becomes a case of changing the affective character of the scene based on this music, and which will change over time as you see it, depending on when you happen to see this piece. That's a good place to start, maybe?
That's a good place to start.
To set some questions. Any questions?
Well, Stan, maybe could you tell us a little bit about? Oh no, go on. I won't do it. Go on.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you talk about the Conrad novel and commercial film. And in a novel and a commercial film, there's an inherent entertainment value, right? So how do you see the translation of entertainment value in art? Video?
What is entertainment?
Huh?
What is entertainment value? What is that?
Don't answer a question with a question.
No, I don't understand your question. So.
No, I'm saying, how do you see entertainment value in your work? Let's be direct.
I think it's a comedy.
Do you see it?
I think it's a comedy. I think it's a comedy. It's compelling. People seem to be interested in sitting down and watching it. I like it to be entertaining in some sense, so they will stay and watch it. But I still don't understand what your question is. I mean,
that sort of answers it. I guess I'm just wondering what your position on entertainment is. I guess I have probably a different position, but I'm just wondering how you see it as a maker.
I don't make a distinction between, say, if you mean popular culture and high culture, that sort of thing. I don't think that's a real valid distinction. I think you can make interesting art, interesting culture from supposedly high culture, which is not necessarily that high all the time. We have lots of examples of very vulgar, very simplistic, and very uninteresting things that are seen in art galleries, whereas I think Dietrich Dietrichson was often say that The Simpsons often has more content than what he sees in art galleries when he goes from city to city.
Sure,
And
but it's actually entertainment.
But it's also a commentary on the culture at large. I mean, that's very, very dense storytelling in The Simpsons.
The only reason The Simpsons sells commercial time, though, is because it's entertainment, right? Primarily?
I don't understand what entertainment means to you.
Let's call it commercialism. I guess often I find video to be utterly dull and almost aggressively so. And I wonder if I just love to hear, like, why is it always quiet? Why is it always dark? Why is it always slow? Why is there so much slow motion in video? Why is the narrative confusing?
Right.
Like, I guess I feel like it's esoteric to a fault. And I'm not talking about this particular work.
Sure.
In a way, this flirts more with commercial cinema. So I'm wondering how you feel.
I think it's important to have the freedom to do other things. We have lots of 90-minute 3-act stories that are 16:9 aspect ratio. with characters you identify with and a transparent narrative and some sense of realism, which is basically a 19th century form of storytelling. But there are additional ways of telling a story, additional ways of presenting a dramatic situation. I mean, often what we see in Hollywood forgets 100 years of theater making since, Stanislavski is basically a 19th century dramatist. We should still imagine the possibility of doing things which are unconventional. I mean, why not have a movie that surrounds you? Why not have a movie that goes into real time for a period of time? I think these are things to really be considered all the time. There's also terrible video art. I can't defend that. But we need to have the freedom to make unconventional ways of inhabiting time with moving images. Yeah.
Just related to that last point, is this film a linear narrative? I mean, it's obviously fragmented, but is there an end and a beginning, or does it continue around and around?
It's basically two chunks. There's one, you'll see a title that says 2 weeks prior, and then you see a title that says 2 weeks after, and then a chunk of video happens. And it kind of circles around an empty center, which is the event when Stevie is blown up. We never see that. People, that's either anticipating that event or reacting to it, but that thing is never actually seen.
Why do we call the cinema a private room, a private space?
Public space. A public space. Well, the lobby, I'm calling that this is my categorization. I'm calling the lobby of his bookstore, where he sort of sells the books and where they sell tickets to the cinema. I'm calling that a private space because it's his private business, projection booth as well. Mm-hmm. I'm calling the cinema a public space where the people are watching the movie, because this is where a collective experience happens. So even though it is in the frame of commerce, it is still something where we have a communal experience. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sort of playing with that notion. In a sense, our collective experiences are often framed by commerce under capitalism. So that's how that happens. But like this nightclub, which is kind of or this sort of club is a public space where people can go and have a beer, but it's also a place where they sell beer to make their money. So there's commerce happening there. And the street is obviously the street, even though it is in a way controlled by a government or something.
So you intended to make this film in 2008, right? But it happened last year. Would you maybe talk us through why there was this 7-year gap, what happened in all that time, and also the other work that you made in that time?
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah, okay. That'll kill some time. So in 2008, I spent 2008 writing a script, the script for this, adapting the novel, doing research on the revolution, and it was for a foundation called the Lewis Foundation in Lisbon. In the fall of that year, I had done location scouting and then casting. I was told, don't bother coming back to Lisbon, Stan, we haven't got any money, because the foundation was sponsored by an investment bank. That bank collapsed, and so did the foundation. So I moved on to other things. I had other projects on the back burner. Those became my priority. But then little by little, became interested in this subject matter. I mean, I was quite depressed. I sort of just didn't want anything to do with it. But eventually, I got back to the material. So I realized I'd done a lot of work, of research on this revolution and its aftermath, and what it meant in terms of places like Angola, which was kind of an amazing situation where, again, they had a possibility of liberation, but eventually their Liberation Day would turn into an 18-year civil war that became a proxy war for the Cold War, with the various powers being funded by different groups. The MPLA, in a way, were able to take Luanda at a moment that was Cuba's finest hour, because the Cuban military, using Russian hardware, were able to sort of maintain Luanda, even though there was CIA-sponsored groups from the north that were taking harbor in Congo, and from the south, with help from the South Africans, the UNITA, FNLA in the north, UNITA in the south, were attacking them, but they were able to maintain that. But then over the years, as the Civil War escalated, there were 30,000 landmines planted, and again, now it's kind of a autocratic or petro economy. Well, basically oligarchy based on a petroeconomy. But this situation inspired something called Disco Angola, which is a series of photographs that I did that kind of parallels two situations. One was this the utopian promise of this liberation of Angola being corrupted by external forces, and that being the influence of the Cold War powers. Other being disco music, which had been an underground phenomena, underground subculture in New York City, that eventually became commercialized by the record industry, which wanted to make it something they could sell money for. So discotheques in New York City, which was kind of a wreck at that point, it was bankrupt, it was dangerous, but people found lofts in Soho, hotels in Midtown Manhattan where they could have these parties where we had a mix of people who were from all different groups, black, white, Latino, gay and straight, who were partying in these clubs, which would be have DJs playing a mix of R&B music, African music, and Latin music to sort of give us a certain vibe or a certain sound, which eventually was formalized into what we know as disco. So in this series of photographs, I made different episodes of what somebody might be able to witness at that moment, and in which there are either thematic or visual rhymes between the scenes, where we see how, in different cases, somebody, in a way, is seeing through their experience analogs between one form of infestation of an exterior force and another in these two situations. When I finally went back to look at the script for The Secret Agent, I realized I still liked it. I wanted to do it, did some tweaks to it. But the company I was going to work with in Portugal went bankrupt, the film company. And I found a new one who were great, but they were busy that year. So I instead made a piece called Luana Kinshasa. This was 2013, I guess. And then, which is, in a way, looking at the same situation, but takes one of my favorite records, Miles Davis's On the Corner, and I make more of it. The selfless version of making the pieces, I always loved this record, but it was only, I guess, 45 minutes long, so I wanted to make some more music. And I got a group of musicians together to make what would have been the next logical step beyond what Davis did with On the Corner. And On the Corner, he makes a mix of basically jazz music, rock music, funk music, and Indian classical music. The next logical step would be to integrate Afrobeat, because Manu Dibango's Soul Makossa was the biggest hit in disco underground, and that was exactly the same time as On the Corner was made, so we made that music in a place, in a church in Brooklyn. Miles Davis made all of his records in a place they called The Church, which was the CBS studio on 30th Street, a desacralized church. We found a church in Brooklyn and dressed it in a similar manner. And I got a band that was, the band leader was Jason Moran of 10 musicians. On one side of the space, there was all the rhythm instruments. There was drums, bass, rhythm guitar, conga, drums, bass, rhythm guitar, conga, and something else. Was that it? Drums, bass, rhythm guitar, congas, and tablas. Other side, there was the percussion, moog, lead guitar, Rhodes piano, and saxophone. So the first day, we shot it for 2 days. One day we shot the one side of the space for doing a whole series of 10-minute takes until we sort of refined what the kind of sound we wanted to get. And then the next day, those takes were played back to the lead instruments, where they made new music new takes based on these various takes and sort of adaptations we were making. Then for the next few months, I took these two sets of the sounds and put them together through editing and arranging. The funny thing is that because we're seeing all the things, music being made, it couldn't be arranged until it was edited, and it couldn't be edited until it was arranged. So this had to be a sort of integrated process, which I learned a lot from doing that. I guess the first 5 songs I could do by myself, but I needed help from my musical director to figure out the sort of key problems in the different takes and make that resolve in some way. This, in a way, is a parallel to what Miles Davis was doing at the period. He was basically improvising stuff with his bands in the studio, and then with his producer, Tio Macero, he'd go back and cut that to make sort of the final composition. These compositions he would then go out and perform in concerts and do additional variations. So what was his practice, I've expanded to the visual form as well in this case. And the look of it was all based on something called Sympathy for the Devil by Joe Goddard, where he filmed the Rolling Stones trying to record that song over a period of days, where basically they start and stop and start and stop, and their clothes change and their beards grow, and they can't figure the song out until they finally get a conga player in which everything kind of gels. But instead of this sort of stunted compositional process, this is more of this sort of geyser of music that spews out, where there's about an hour and a half of unique music, but then resequences to make 6 hours of music. So in a way, you're in this sort of constant flow of music, which is kind of this utopian space of a synthesis of these various cultures. The year for that, I made a play called Helen Lawrence that began in Vancouver, then toured in various places in the world. And then finally, last March, the stars aligned, and I was able to shoot the Secret Agent in Lisbon for 3 weeks. And here we are.
When you said men talking mostly to men,
Yeah.
what's the role of women?
I guess the expectation was the woman would be the one who would tell the Inspector Heat what he wants to know passively. She's the one who would stay with Verloc because he doesn't run away as he could, because everybody thinks he's dead. She's his wife, and therefore he'll stand by her, even though he's killed her son. She is the only one who has any action. At that moment, she, in a fury, kills Verloc for doing that. So she sort of has agency at that moment. Everybody else is all talk, but she actually does something.
So any more questions before we put the sound back on? Great. Stan, thank you so much for all that information. It's tremendous. And so yeah,
TMI.
exactly. So okay, then we'll restart the installation, and then at 8 o'clock we will open. So we'll have very short speeches, and then the buffet will be served after that. So, danke. Yeah.